Welcome to HOA Control Freaks. She tried to ban me, so I documented everything. I am not the one you bully. Melanie Brooks held a small tool case above her head like it was Exhibit A in a murder trial, and yelled that it disappeared after I was seen near the garage. Her voice carried across the entire Desert Palms Community Association parking lot. "Rules are rules," she snapped, "and you were the last one near the maintenance shed." I stood in my driveway with my arms crossed, staring her down. I had not touched her tool case. I had not been near the shed. But Melanie was the board treasurer, and in Nashville, Tennessee, that title carried weight she had been abusing for months. She claimed she had multiple witnesses and refused to name them. That was the trigger that told me this was not a misunderstanding. This was a setup. I told her to name one witness right now. She waved the tool case again and said that was not how this worked. She would file the complaint with management, and they would handle it through proper channels. I said fine, file it, because I had nothing to hide. She smiled, turned on her heel, and walked toward the clubhouse. I watched her go, feeling the first cold drop of dread in my stomach. I am an IT compliance auditor. I know how to read patterns. I know how to spot inconsistencies. And I knew Melanie Brooks was lying. Desert Palms is a planned community with a central clubhouse and constant enforcement patrols. It was built in the early 2000s, all matching tan stucco and tile roofs, with strict rules about everything from lawn height to mailbox color. The HOA was aggressive. They loved notices, loved fines, loved forcing surprise hearings as a pressure tactic. I had moved here 2 years ago after a bad financial year, trying to rebuild. I could not absorb bogus fees. I could not afford to be framed for theft. The stakes were real. Melanie Brooks was 47, always dressed like she was about to negotiate a corporate merger, and she loved her title. Board treasurer meant she controlled vendor contracts, approved expenses, and had access to every key in the community. Her catchphrase, "Rules are rules," came out whenever she wanted to end an argument. She wore her light brown hair in a pulled-back ponytail, carried a phone on speaker blasting vendor calls like she was running a Fortune 500 company, and she had a habit of printing identical complaint forms with printed names and handing them out like subpoenas. No readable text, just the thread of process. 2 days after the tool case accusation, I got a notice under my door. It was printed on Desert Palms letterhead, signed by Melanie, and it accused me of theft from the maintenance shed. The notice demanded I pay a $200 investigation fee within 7 days, or face a lien on my property. That was her threat. A lien. If I did not pay, she would put a legal claim against my home for a crime I did not commit. I called the management office immediately. The staff told me the complaint was already filed and labeled as resolved. Resolved. I had not even been contacted for my side of the story. The staff said Melanie had submitted witness statements and video evidence, and the board had approved the fee. I asked to see the evidence. They said it was in the file, but the file was currently with Melanie for review. I asked when I could see it. They said they would get back to me. That was escalation step 2. Management refused to help because Melanie had labeled the file as resolved. I was being steamrolled by process. I went to see my neighbor, Carl Hendricks. Carl was a former board member who had kept old files after his term ended. He was 72, retired, and he had watched Melanie take over the board with growing alarm. I told him what was happening. He nodded slowly and said Melanie had been doing this for months, stealing small items, framing people, and using the HOA process to cover it up. He pulled out a box of old board minutes and vendor contracts. He said Melanie had access to everything. Keys, vendor schedules, complaint forms, the community portal. If something went missing, she could point the finger anywhere. Carl handed me a key control log from 6 months ago. It was a spreadsheet with timestamps and names. Melanie Brooks had checked out the maintenance shed key 17 times in 3 months. No one else had checked it out more than twice. I asked if I could make a copy. Carl said take the original. He had a backup. That was my first piece of evidence. A key control log that showed Melanie had access. I started building a timeline. The next morning, Melanie showed up at my front door with a clipboard and a portable printer. She knocked hard 3 times, and when I opened the door, she smiled and said she needed to inspect my garage. I asked why. She said the board had reports of stolen HOA property being stored on my premises. I said no. She said she had the authority to inspect under the bylaws. I said, show me the bylaw. She pulled out her phone, scrolled for a second, then said she would email it to me. I said I would wait. She stared at me, then turned and walked to her car. She sat in the driver's seat, opened her laptop on the steering wheel, and printed a notice on the spot with her portable printer. She walked back, handed it to me, and said I had 24 hours to allow the inspection or face a $500 obstruction fee. That was authority theatrics number 1. Printing a notice on the spot like she was a one-woman legal department. I called an attorney that afternoon. I could not afford a retainer, but I paid for a 1-hour consult. The attorney listened, took notes, and said Melanie was abusing her position. The bylaws allowed inspections only with reasonable cause and written board approval. A single board member could not authorize an inspection alone. The attorney said I should file a formal complaint with the management company and request a copy of my entire HOA file under state records law. I asked how long that would take. The attorney said 2 to 4 weeks. I told her I had 24 hours before a $500 fee hit my account. She said refuse the inspection, document everything, and if they charge the fee, dispute it in writing immediately. I refused the inspection. Melanie sent an email that night saying the obstruction fee was approved and would be charged to my account within 48 hours. I replied with a formal dispute, citing the bylaw section the attorney had referenced, and I copied the management company and the entire board. Melanie replied within 10 minutes. She said the board had already voted, and my dispute was noted but overruled. I checked the board meeting minutes online. There was no meeting. There was no vote. She had fabricated the approval. That was the lie. She claimed she was neutral while actively recruiting people against me. She was running the process like a shadow government, and no one was stopping her. If you are enjoying this story, hit the like button and subscribe for more wild HOA drama and lawful revenge. I started digging into the theft scenario that had started all of this. The original accusation was about a missing tool case from the maintenance shed. But a week before that, there had been another incident. Theft from cars. Someone had been breaking into vehicles in the guest parking area, taking small items. Registration paperwork, loose change, a refund check envelope. That last one caught my attention. A refund check envelope. One of the victims had filed a police report. I found the case number in the community Facebook group. I called the non-emergency line and asked if I could get a copy of the report. The deputy said I could request it through the records office, but it would take a few days. I said I would come in person. I drove to the station, filled out the request form, and paid the $5 fee. The clerk handed me a printed copy 20 minutes later. I sat in my car and read it. The victim was a resident named Laura Simmons. She had parked in guest parking on a Thursday night in October. The next morning, her car had been opened. Nothing was broken, but her glove box was rifling through and a refund check envelope was missing. The envelope had contained a check for $300 from a warranty claim. Laura said she had not locked her car. The deputy noted there was no forced entry. The report included a note that a neighbor had a dash cam that might have caught the parking area. I called Laura. She remembered the incident immediately. She said she had given the dash cam footage to the HOA because Melanie had promised to review it and increase security patrols. Laura asked if the footage had helped. I said I did not know, but I would like to see it. Laura said she had a copy on a thumb drive. She offered to drop it off. I said I would come pick it up. Laura handed me the thumb drive in her driveway that afternoon. She said the camera angle was not great, but you could see the parking area and part of the sidewalk. I thanked her and went home. I plugged the drive into my laptop and opened the video file. The timestamp showed October 14th, 11:47 at night. The parking area was lit by a single street lamp. A figure walked into frame from the left. Dark jacket, hood up, ponytail visible. The figure walked directly to Laura's car, opened the door, leaned in, and rifled through the glove box. 20 seconds later, the figure stood up, holding a small envelope, and walked out of frame. The figure never looked at the camera. But the ponytail and the walk were unmistakable. It was Melanie Brooks. I saved the file, and made 3 backup copies. I sent one to Carl. I kept one on my desktop. I put one on a new thumb drive and locked it in my desk drawer. Then I went back through my HOA records. I pulled every complaint form, every notice, every email Melanie had sent me in the past 6 months. I printed them all and put them in a tabbed binder. I labeled the tabs: complaints, notices, emails, evidence, timeline. I was building a case. The next Monday, I got another notice. This one was delivered by a tow company. The driver knocked on my door and handed me a bright orange flyer. It said my vehicle was parked in violation of community standards and would be towed within 72 hours if I did not move it to a compliant space. I walked outside. My car was parked in my assigned spot, exactly where it had been for 2 years. The spot number was painted on the curb. I took a photo. I called the tow company. The dispatcher said they had received a request from the Desert Palms HOA to enforce parking violations. I asked who had submitted the request. The dispatcher said it came from the board treasurer, Melanie Brooks. I said my car was parked in my assigned spot and there was no violation. The dispatcher said he would note my objection, but the request was already in the system. If the HOA did not cancel it, the tow would proceed. I called the management office again. The staff said they had no record of a parking violation for my address. I asked if Melanie could submit tow requests without management approval. The staff hesitated, then said board members could request enforcement actions, but they were supposed to go through the management office first. I asked them to cancel the tow. The staff said they would send a message to Melanie. 2 days later, the tow truck showed up. I was at work when it happened. I got a call from Carl. He said a flatbed was in front of my house and the driver was hooking up my car. I told Carl to record it. I left work immediately and drove home. By the time I arrived, my car was gone. The driver had left a receipt taped to my front door. It said my car was towed for unauthorized parking and I could retrieve it from the impound lot for $450 plus a daily storage fee. I drove to the impound lot. I brought my binder, my phone, and the photo of my assigned parking spot. The lot manager was a man in his 50s with grease-stained hands and a skeptical expression. I showed him the receipt. He pulled up my car in his system and said the tow was requested by the Desert Palms HOA for a parking violation. I showed him the photo of my car in my assigned spot. I showed him the spot number painted on the curb. I showed him the parking map from my HOA welcome packet. The lot manager looked at the documents, then looked at me. He said it looked like a bad tow. I asked if I could get my car back without paying. He said he could not release the car without payment or a written cancellation from the HOA. I asked for the name of the person who had requested the tow. He pulled up the order form and said Melanie Brooks, board treasurer. I took a photo of his screen. No readable text, but the layout was clear. I called Melanie from the parking lot. She answered on the first ring. I said my car had been towed and I wanted an explanation. She said my car was parked in a guest spot, not my assigned spot. I said I had a photo showing my car in my assigned spot with the painted number visible. She paused, then said the complaint was filed by a neighbor who reported the violation. I asked which neighbor. She said she could not disclose that. I said I wanted the tow canceled and my car released. She said I could file a dispute with the board at the next meeting. I said the next meeting was 3 weeks away and I needed my car now. She said rules are rules and towing costs were my responsibility. Then she hung up. That was the boomerang line. I can make this official with one phone call. She had said it 2 months ago when I questioned a fine for leaving my trash bin out past 6 at night. Now she was making it official, over and over, and every call was another charge on my account. I paid the $450 on my credit card and got my car back. I added the impound receipt to my binder. I was now out $950 in fees and charges, none of which I had caused. My rebuild year was turning into a financial disaster, and Melanie was the one holding the shovel. That night, Carl called me. He said he had been asking around the community and found something interesting. A gate staff worker, a young guy named Marcus, had mentioned to Carl that Melanie had been pressuring management to lock me out of the resident portal while standing in the office. Marcus had overheard the conversation. Melanie had told the office staff that I was a security risk and my portal access should be suspended pending the theft investigation. The staff had refused, saying they needed written board approval for that kind of action. Melanie had argued for 10 minutes, reading from her notes dramatically like she was in court, citing bylaws and precedent. The staff had held firm. Marcus said it was the most intense thing he had seen in months. That was authority theatrics number 2, and it gave me another witness. Marcus had seen Melanie in action. I called Marcus and asked if he would be willing to talk to me about what he saw. Marcus hesitated, then said he liked his job and did not want trouble. I said I understood, but if it came down to a hearing, would he be willing to tell the truth? Marcus said yes, if it came to that. I thanked him and added his name to my notes. I now had 3 pieces of evidence. The key control log showing Melanie had access to the maintenance shed, the dashcam video showing Melanie stealing from Laura's car, and Marcus as a witness to Melanie's pressure tactics. I needed more. I needed something that directly connected her to the missing tool case and the refund check envelope. I went back to the original theft complaint. The tool case had disappeared from the maintenance shed on a Saturday morning in November. The maintenance shed had a sign-in log for residents who borrowed tools. I had never signed in. I requested a copy of the log from the management office. They said the log was kept by the board and I would need to request it from Melanie. I said that was a conflict of interest. They said they would pass along my request. A week went by with no response. I filed a formal records request under Tennessee state law. The law required the HOA to provide records within 10 business days. I sent the request by certified mail to the management office and copied the entire board. I got the green card back, confirming delivery. 10 business days later, I had received nothing. I sent a follow-up email reminding the board of the deadline. Melanie replied. She said the log was missing. Missing. The log that tracked who had accessed the maintenance shed was now missing, and Melanie was the one who had reported it missing. I replied asking when it had gone missing. She said she had noticed it missing the same day the tool case was reported stolen. I asked if she had filed a report about the missing log. She said it was an internal matter and did not require a report. That was the moment I knew she had destroyed the log. She had access, motive, and opportunity. She had stolen the tool case, framed me, and then destroyed the evidence that would have cleared me. I needed to prove it. I went back to my binder and pulled out the complaint forms Melanie had filed against me. There were 4 in total, 1 for the tool case, 1 for the trash bin, 1 for the parking violation, 1 for lawn height. I laid them out on my desk and compared them. Every form was identical. Same template, same font, same layout. Same printed name at the bottom, Melanie Brooks, board treasurer. No handwriting, no signature, just a printed name. I pulled out the parking complaint. I checked the metadata on the PDF. The file had been created on a Thursday. The tow truck had shown up on a Friday. The complaint claimed the violation had been reported by a neighbor on a Tuesday. The timeline did not match. Melanie had backdated the complaint to make it look like a neighbor had reported it, but the file creation date proved she had made the complaint herself after the fact. That was clue prop number 2. 2 identical complaint forms held side by side, showing the same template and the same metadata mismatch. I printed the metadata report and added it to my binder. I now had enough to take this public. I needed a showdown, and I needed it to be in front of witnesses. I checked the HOA calendar. The board was hosting a community poolgate meeting to discuss new security measures. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday afternoon at the poolgate entrance, open to all residents. Melanie would be there. Carl would be there. Marcus would be there. I could present my evidence in front of everyone and force the board to respond. Saturday came. I arrived at the poolgate at 2 in the afternoon. The gate was a chain-link fence with a card reader and a small covered area with benches. About 20 residents were gathered, along with Melanie, 2 other board members, and the management office staff. Carl was sitting on a bench near the back. Marcus was standing near the gate wearing his staff uniform. I carried my tabbed binder and my phone. I wore my black zip jacket with the hood up and my gray beanie. Melanie saw me and smiled. She was wearing her blue blazer with the hood up, holding her phone on speaker, and she had a stack of identical complaint forms under her arm. The board president, a man named Dennis, called the meeting to order. He started talking about new security cameras and gate access protocols. Melanie interrupted. She said before they discussed security, they needed to address an ongoing theft issue. She said there had been multiple incidents of stolen property, and one resident in particular had been identified as a person of interest. She looked directly at me. I stayed calm. Dennis asked Melanie to clarify. Melanie said she had filed multiple complaints against me, and the board had approved fees and enforcement actions. She said I had refused to cooperate with inspections and had disputed every charge. She said I was a repeat offender and a security risk. That was the public shame method. She was trying to force my ally, Carl, to contradict me in front of everyone. Carl stood up. He said he had known me for 2 years and I had always been respectful and honest. He said he had concerns about how the complaints had been handled. Melanie cut him off. She said Carl was no longer on the board and his opinion was not relevant. Carl said his opinion was relevant because he had kept records. He pulled out the key control log and held it up. He said Melanie had checked out the maintenance shed key 17 times in 3 months, and no one else had checked it out more than twice. Melanie said that was because she was the treasurer, and she had responsibilities. Carl said it was also convenient that the sign-in log had gone missing the same day the tool case was reported stolen. The crowd murmured. Dennis asked Melanie if she had an explanation. Melanie said the log was missing and there was nothing she could do about that. I stood up. I said I had an explanation. I said I had evidence that Melanie had been stealing from residents and framing me to cover it up. Melanie laughed. She said that was ridiculous. I opened my binder. I pulled out the gate fob log printout, the 2 identical complaint forms, and the metadata report. I held them up. I said the complaint forms had been backdated. I said the metadata showed Melanie had created the parking complaint after the tow truck had already been called. I said she had fabricated a neighbor report to justify the tow. Melanie stepped forward. She said I was lying. She said she had witnesses. I asked her to name one witness. She said she did not have to name them. I said that was because they did not exist. She raised her voice. She said she had video evidence. I said show it. She pulled out her phone and started scrolling. She said the video was in her email. She said she would pull it up right now. The crowd watched. Melanie scrolled for 30 seconds. Then she stopped. She said the email was not loading. She said the file was too large. I said that was convenient. Marcus stepped forward. He said he had something to add. He said he had overheard Melanie trying to pressure the management office to lock me out of the resident portal. He said the staff had refused because they needed written board approval. He said Melanie had argued for 10 minutes, reading from her notes like she was in court. Melanie turned red. She said Marcus was mistaken. Marcus said he was not mistaken. He said he was standing right there and he heard every word. That was the funny karma beat. She said she had witnesses, and the witness turned and said actually no. Dennis asked Melanie to respond. Melanie said Marcus was disgruntled and had an agenda. Marcus said he liked his job and he was telling the truth. Dennis said the board would need to review the evidence. I said there was one more thing. I pulled out my phone. I opened the video file Laura had given me. I said I had dashcam footage from October 14th showing someone stealing a refund check envelope from a parked car. I said the footage showed a figure in a dark jacket and ponytail rifling through a glove box. I turned my phone toward the crowd. I pressed play. The video played for 20 seconds. The crowd leaned in. The figure was clear. The ponytail was clear. The walk was clear. It was Melanie Brooks. Melanie screamed. She said the video was fake. She said I had edited it. I said the video had a timestamp and metadata. I said Laura Simmons had provided the original file and I had made copies. I said I was happy to turn the copies over to the police. Melanie said I was threatening her. I said I was clearing my name. Dennis stood up. He said the board would need to meet immediately to discuss this. Melanie said there was nothing to discuss. She said the video did not prove anything. Dennis said it proved enough to warrant an investigation. He said the board would be suspending all pending fees and charges against me until the investigation was complete. He said Melanie would be removed from any enforcement actions involving me. He said if the evidence held up, the board would take further disciplinary action. Melanie looked around. The crowd was staring at her. Carl was smiling. Marcus was nodding. Laura, who had been standing near the back, raised her hand and said that was her car in the video and she wanted her refund check back. Melanie turned and walked toward the gate. She tried to scan her fob. The reader beeped red. Marcus stepped forward. He said gate staff had been instructed to suspend her access pending the investigation. Melanie stared at him. She said that was illegal. Marcus said it was temporary and authorized by the board president. Melanie said I can make this official with one phone call. Marcus said she already had. Then he opened the gate manually and told her to leave through the pedestrian exit. Melanie walked out. She did not look back. The crowd started talking. Dennis said the meeting was adjourned, and the board would send an update within 48 hours. Carl walked over and shook my hand. He said that was the most satisfying thing he had seen in years. Marcus said he was glad he spoke up. Laura said she was filing a police report about the refund check. I said I already had the case number from her original report, and I would forward the video to the detective. 2 days later, I got an email from the management office. The board had completed an emergency review of the evidence. They had found that Melanie Brooks had abused her position as treasurer, filed false complaints, destroyed records, and misused vendor contracts. The board had terminated her vendor contract abuse. She was ordered to stop contacting me directly. All fees and charges against me were reversed and refunded. My HOA account was credited $950. The board also voted to terminate Melanie from her position as treasurer, effective immediately. She was barred from holding any board position for 5 years. The email included an attachment. It was a written correction signed by Dennis, acknowledging that I had been wrongly accused and that the board apologized for the mishandling of my complaints. The correction was copied to the entire community and posted on the resident portal. That was the final humiliation moment. Management handed me the written correction while Melanie watched. She had been standing in the parking lot outside the management office when I arrived to pick up my refund check. She saw me walk in. She saw the staff hand me the document. She saw me smile. She turned and walked to her car. She did not say a word. 3 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from the HOA attorney. It explained that a forensic review of Melanie's records had uncovered additional evidence of theft and fraud. Melanie had been using her access to the maintenance shed and the clubhouse to steal small items over the course of 18 months. Tools, petty cash, supplies, and items from parked cars. She had been selling some of the items online and pocketing the cash. The total estimated loss was over $6,000. The HOA had filed a civil claim to recover the funds, and the police had opened a criminal investigation. The letter also explained that the certified letter trail I had provided, showing that Melanie's dates did not match, had been critical in unraveling the case. The board had compared my timeline to Melanie's complaint forms and found at least 12 instances where she had backdated documents to cover her tracks. The HOA had terminated the vendor contract she had abused, and the tow company had refunded all towing fees paid by residents who had been wrongly towed. Carl called me a few days later. He said Melanie had moved out of Desert Palms. She had sold her house in a short sale and left town. No one knew where she had gone. Carl said the community was still processing what had happened, but most people were relieved. The board had hired a new management company with stricter oversight, and they had implemented new policies to prevent any single board member from having too much power. Carl said it was a good change. I kept the tabbed binder. I kept the video file. I kept the key control log and the complaint forms. I did not need them anymore, but I wanted to remember. I wanted to remember that bullies like Melanie Brooks can be stopped if you stay calm, gather evidence, and force the truth into the light. I had cleared my name. I had gotten my money back. I had protected my home, and I had done it all within the law. Until next time, take care and stay safe out there.